The manhwa opens with our MC, Raven Balt, deep in the forest battling demonic monsters himself. A demonic monster mentions defeating all of the demonic monsters is expected of the immortal blackbird Raven Balt, a fearsome monster hunter known for slaying demons, and then, Raven swiftly eliminates the monster. It took Raven years to get to this point in his life, but now he eagerly anticipates his imminent freedom, just 15 days away. Arriving at the encampment of the Devil's Army, Raven looks at the guards who are drinking and celebrating while the prisoners sit in chains. The Devil's Army forces its soldiers, many of whom are captives or criminals, to relentlessly fight demonic monsters, and no one cares whether they die or not. As Raven proceeds to his tent, a guard it seems like Raven is the only one who came back alive again and that, surprisingly, Raven has managed to survive all this time considering he used to be a noble. The leader, a shirtless fat guard, approaches Raven, flanked by colleagues, addressing him as Raven Blackbird, and asking him if he is ignoring him again. Raven asks the man if he is desperate to die, and then punches him in his big belly. Raven swiftly unsheathes his sword, delivering a minor slash to one guard's neck, then seizing the bald one's head and slamming him to the ground. With a menacing move, he thrusts his sword into the ground before the leader and warns the guard that if he can't wait for monsters to devour him, he is always ready for a brawl. The guard swears and tells Raven that he will be sorry for what he did, as he walks away. Raven is a noble who fell into ruin after a life of extravagance. Now he is a monster, who survived a decade in the Devil's Army when most perish within a year. These rumors spread about Raven and he believes them. The Balt family, while not highly esteemed, was popular in the empire. Raven, witnessing his family's demise, pleaded innocence but was condemned. Raven had lost everything one fateful night 10 years ago. He watched his family's house burn while in chains and being mocked by other nobles. The Balt family was accused of being traitors of the empire, and they were made to pay for their sins with their lives. A young Raven desperately pleaded his family's innocence, insisting they were framed, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. The prosecutor callously informed him of his parents' execution and offered Raven an alternative, 10 years of battling demonic monsters as a member of the Devil's Army, and if he accepted the offer, his life would be spared. The nobles present scoffed at Raven's plight. Undeterred, Raven inquired if surviving the next 10 years fighting monsters would truly grant him freedom. The prosecutor confirmed that enduring a decade of hardship would grant him the liberty to choose his path afterward. Determined, Raven vowed to survive, and rebuild the Balt family, regardless of the challenges that lay ahead. Ever since then, Raven was dumped in the Devil's Army camp, where he eliminated demonic monsters without any training or experience. He gave it his all to stay alive. He was an ordinary nobleman, but now he has become the best monster hunter in the Devil's Army. His next mission of eradicating demonic monsters will be his last, and his freedom and the restoration of the Balt family are only a step away. Meanwhile, in the Ancona forest of the Duchy of the Pendragon, a white dragon lands in front of a trembling young man and calls him, "Young Rider." Then it tells the young rider that the time has come for him to fulfill his oath. The dragon is the most powerful creature ever known, surpassing any other monster that roams the world. Only one family possesses the ability to tame and make a dragon their familiar, and that is the Pendragon family. With their ability to control a dragon, the Pendragons have risen to great power, becoming one of the empire's most prestigious noble families. Back to Raven, with just 13 days until his freedom, he approaches Valtai, the commander of the Devil's Army's tent. Valtai, amidst his indulgence in food and drink, with 2 captive women serving him, asks Raven what the results of his recon are. Raven reports that numerous demonic monsters ahead on the front lines, and if they unite in battle, the army stands no chance. Unfazed, Valtai reveals that House Pendragon will send assistance the next day, bringing with them the world's mightiest creature, the dragon. Skeptical, Raven asks Valtai if he is sure, and says that he thought dragons were just creatures from legends. Valtai, undeterred, informs him that the great white dragon, which has been House Pendragon's familiar for generations, is indeed joining to combat the monsters. Raven struggles to accept that the Pendragon family, renowned for holding the Empire's highest rank and boasting members of imperial bloodlines, possesses a dragon. Despite hearing rumors about their success in taming one, he still can't believe it. Having faced various demonic monsters before, the idea of encountering a dragon makes him question Valtai's sanity. Additionally, he has also heard rumors of House Pendragon's decline in power after the previous family head's demise, fueling Raven's doubts. He expresses his doubts to Valtai, who tells him that it doesn't matter if he believes, and that he doesn't have to take part in the battle. Valtai informs Raven that his role is to escort the young Pendragon Lord, whom he refers to as a kid, during the impending battle, and that the dragon will deal with the demonic monsters. Raven agrees to the task, and Valtai laughs as he directs Raven to report to the young Pendragon Lord. Then Valtai extends his gratitude for the job Raven is expected to undertake the following day. Raven goes to the Pendragon tent thinking that for a lofty family of imperial blood to actually come to help trash like them means the situation must be dire. He can't believe his final mission is guarding some spoiled little brat. He also doesn't care whether they win or lose the battle, as all he needs to do is stay alive, then he will be free, which is all that matters to him. He makes his presence known as he enters the tent, and a voice asks him who he is, which makes him shudder. The voice almost doesn't sound human to Raven. Apologizing for the unannounced entrance, Raven cautiously asks the owner of the eerie voice if he is the young lord of House Pendragon. Confirming his identity, Lord Pendragon instructs Raven to state his name and purpose. Raven introduces himself as Raven Balt, captain of the 12th unit in the Devil's Army, and tells him the reason he is there. Lord Pendragon dismisses him, telling him to rest for the upcoming battle. When Raven doesn't leave, young Lord Pendragon asks him if inquires he has anything else to say, and he asks about the dragon. Lord Pendragon assures him the dragon will arrive without fail and dismisses him again. Raven heads out of the tent wondering if the young lord is truly a brat. He also notices that the tent is strangely quiet, and thinks that the son of a duke would never come to such a place alone. But he doesn't dwell on it too much since he will be seeing him the following day. The next day, the Devil's Army assembles in front of the Pendragon tent. Valtai calls out the young lord, announcing that the battle has begun. When he gets no response, he starts to raise his voice again, only for the Pendragon tent to erupt in an explosion. As the dust settles, a white dragon emerges, surprising Raven. The dragon calms and the battle-ready young lord introduces himself as Allen Pendragon and says that they should begin the eradication of the demonic monsters. In the Roptine Plains where the battle is taking place, hours later, a few demonic monsters encircle Raven and Allen. Raven tells Allen that he is unaccustomed to simultaneously fighting and protecting someone, and advises Allen to minimize his movements. Drawing his sword, Raven thinks that since the white dragon is wiping out all the demonic monsters in the sky, he will have to focus on his duties below. As usual, he defeats the monsters and watches as the dragon fights the monsters in the sky. Raven says to Allen, who is also watching the dragon, that he didn't know the white dragon existed. He also says that he heard that no monster is a match for the dragon and that it is truly as amazing as the old tales say. Despite a substantial number of monsters initially, the dragon single-handedly eliminated more than half, securing an impending victory. Raven thinks that he is lucky to have this battle as his final mission. The dragon lands behind Allen, surprising him, and Raven, who notices, inquires about Allen's well-being, to which he responds that he's fine. Raven begins to tell Allen that the battle is nearing its end but halts upon spotting a new wave of monsters in the sky. He tells Allen to command the dragon to fight the new monsters, but stops in surprise when he sees the dragon and Allen looking at each other, and then close their eyes. As the monsters descend, Raven notices that there are a lot of them, but he believes that the dragon will defeat them. However, the white dragon looks at them and closes its eyes, and then the monsters immediately start attacking it, which shocks Raven. In disbelief, Raven questions the dragon's lack of retaliation as the demonic monsters attack. Yelling at the dragon, he grabs the seemingly unresponsive Allen, who stands motionless, when he notices more monsters approaching. He is surprised by how many there are when he is sure that they got rid of many of them. Then the monsters pounce on them. As Raven fights them off, he recalls all the nice things he said and thought about the dragon, and thinks that he was a fool to delude himself with such weak thoughts. A while later, the dragon lies on the ground with multiple weapons in its body, the dead body of the army littered around, and an exhausted Raven sits on the bleeding. As the demonic monsters move to finish off the men, 3 small green creatures wielding weapons approach Raven. With a single powerful swipe of his sword, Raven swiftly dispatches them, despite being weak. He struggles to stand, using his sword as a makeshift support as he thinks that his stamina is running out and his wounds are taking time to heal. He looks at the motionless dragon and mutters that they are both fools. Approaching the dragon, Raven questions if it's truly dead, but gets no response. His attention shifts to Allen, who coughs, injured and resting on the dragon's body. Raven grips Allen's cape, demanding answers about why the dragon ceased its attack and what orders Allen gave the dragon, but Allen remains silent, prompting Raven to raise his voice. Then someone stabs Raven from behind. Valtai, who is the person that stabbed Raven, remarks that Raven is still alive when his heart's been pierced, which is why he is called the Grim Reaper. Raven utters Valtai's name, Valtai laughs, declaring it's over, and commands his army to charge. Raven notices the Imperial Army flag and wonders why Valtai is leading them. Valtai points his weapon at Allen's neck and says that someone else above them decides their fate, and they are mere puppets struggling for survival on this stage. Allen closes his eyes, and Valtai, grinning, beheads him, leaving Raven in shock. Valtai reveals that Allen's death was predetermined before he set his foot on the battlefield, just as Raven's fate has already been decided. He kicks Raven to the ground as he talks about Raven's freedom being in a few days. And then he grabs Raven by the hair, saying it is a shame things had to be this way, and his fighting skills were truly outstanding. Raven questions if Valtai knew what would happen all along, and Valtai admits to feigning ignorance and says that even if Raven is immortal, he could die if his head gets chopped off. He darkly adds that, unfortunately, Raven will never experience true freedom, he is destined to die. Raven thinks about what he plans to do once he is freed, which is the only reason he fought for a decade in the Devil's Army. Now he is in the exact same situation as he was in before. He must face humiliation and death in a place like this, all because he is too weak to fight back. Valtai reveals to him that, in his final moments, he will disclose a little secret. The secret is that the false accusations of treason against his family, Raven's enlistment in the Devil's Army, and his and Allen's death, are all intertwined. Valtai explains that while they hadn't anticipated the dragon to be so weak, aside from that detail, everything else was orchestrated as part of someone's grand scheme. Then he chops off Raven's head. After everyone departs, the white dragon, assumed dead, opens its eyes. It takes the weapons from its body and then gazes at Raven and Allen's severed heads on the ground. It says that all conditions have been met, just as the pool blood on the floor ascends, and the dragon hovers in the air. It says that the blood of 1,000 men, demonic monsters, and rulers of humans and dragons, on this day when the sun meets the moon, will fulfill an oath. Light emanates from its head, causing Raven and Allen's heads to glow before disappearing. Landing. The dragon looks at the moon, stating, "The rest is in your hands, young rider," before its head falls off. The next thing Raven realizes is that he is floating in a void, wondering if he is dead, and he can hear twisting and breaking sounds coming from his body, which he recognizes from when his body regenerates after being seriously injured. Slowly opening his eyes, he glimpses a maid and wonders about where he is, and what is going on. He feels someone touch his wrist and immediately sits up. Startled, the maid, Lindsay, rushes out of the room, calling for help and mentioning Lord Allen. Raven surveys the luxurious unfamiliar surroundings, wondering where he is. Lindsay returns with a shocked butler and an old woman. The butler addresses him as Lord and asks him if he remembers his identity. Raven, perplexed, asks if the butler is addressing him. The butler explains they are in Conrad Castle, Duchy of Pendragon, and he is Lord Allen Pendragon, the castle's owner. Shocked, Raven asks the butler if he is indeed Allen Pendragon, then hastily checks his reflection in a bowl of water. To his amazement, he sees the face of the young lord staring back at him. Lindsay asks if he has lost his memory, and the butler explains that it is natural for him to be confused since he has been unconscious for 3 years. Raven wonders if it means that it has been 3 years since the battle. In his confusion, he thinks that he is sure that Allen was beheaded on that battlefield, and he too, then assumes that he survived because he is immortal, yet the transformation into Allen bewilders him. Duchess Elena bursts into the room, addressing him as her son, and he just stares at her wondering who she is. She approaches him, asking if he is truly awake, and to his surprise, she passes through the old woman like she isn't there. The old woman lifts a finger, smiles, and then winks at him. Elena hugs him tightly, declaring herself as his mother. Dazed, he wonders if he's dreaming, glancing at the old woman who points to the window. Following the old woman's gesture, Raven is surprised to see the white dragon, which he calls Soldrake. The dragon reacts with a flinch, followed by a deafening roar that shatters the window. Then Soldrake flies to the window, while Raven wonders how he knows the dragon's name and if it survived on the battlefield. Elena screams at the dragon, pleading for it not to ruin her son further. Soldrake glares at her, growling, and she closes her eyes, anticipating harm. The old woman reaches for the dragon, prompting Raven to rush forward, yelling, "Stop it," and everyone looks at him. The old woman just winks at him as she pets Soldrake, and Elena asks him what is wrong and tells him to step back since it is dangerous. To his astonishment, he realizes he's the only one who can see the old woman. Soldrake responds to the old woman's words by closing its eyes and flying away. The old woman turns to Raven, winks, and then disappears, leaving Raven in a state of confusion and bewilderment. The butler, Melbourne, checks on her well-being. Elena, in turn, asks her son if he is okay. Raven realizes he's in a luxurious castle with caring servants and a white dragon, which makes him come to terms with the fact that he has now become Allen Pendragon. Elena affectionately calls him Allen, and he responds with a smile, addressing her as "mother," which makes her sigh in relief. As Elena and Melbourne engage in a private discussion, Raven thinks that feeling confused will solve nothing, and if this is reality, he needs to gather as much information as he can to sort things out. But first, he will have to start collecting information so no one will notice that he is not Allen. Now Raven Balt is now Allen Pendragon. In Raven's days with the Devil's Army, the Empire's lowest ranking where survival was deemed nearly impossible, he survived due to unparalleled combat skills and superhuman abilities. No demonic monster or human was a match for him. 7 years before the pivotal battle, he hunted monsters independently, his senses attuned to their presence. Now, reborn as Allen, he finds himself being spoon-fed like a child. Raven, who we will now be calling Allen, tells Lindsay as she tries to free him that it has been a while since he regained consciousness so he can eat by himself. He tries to take the spoon from her but she refuses, saying that the physician said he needs complete rest, and then tells him to open his mouth. Allen thinks that Lindsay must have been for the original Allen before he woke up, and since she is being incredibly overprotective of him, he decides against being harsh and lets her feed him, despite feeling awkward. When he finishes his meal, Lindsay thanks him for finishing his meal and offers to assist him in dressing while waiting for his medicine. Allen stands up from his bed, holding his long locks while telling her that he can manage on his own. He tells her that he is going to wash his face so she should bring him his clothes and something to tie my hair with. However, Lindsay, shocked, rushes to stop him from walking, insisting on taking care of everything. She pleads with him to be comfortable and makes him sit on a stool so she can tie his hair. He sits despite desperately wanting to be alone. As Lindsay finishes helping him dress, she asks him if there is anything else he needs. Allen, eager for some solitude, says he is fine and starts to dismiss her. However, his solitude is interrupted as Irene and Mia, the original Allen sisters, enter the room. Despite Irene's attempts to stop her, little Mia, with only one leg, hops towards Allen, grabbing his legs, and he forces a grin as he looks at her. Irene asks Allen if he is allowed to walk about, and he assures her that he is fine. Lindsay gives Irene a chair while Allen sits on the bed with Mia on his legs. Then Irene starts rambling about flowers planted by the original Allen. Allen thinks that Irene never stops talking, even though she knows he doesn't have any memory of the past, but he has been able to gather valuable information from her. According to Irene, the original Allen enjoyed reading, drawing, and personally planting flowers. Allen perceives the original Allen as a shy, cowardly individual who secluded himself in his room. Despite being the successor of House Pendragon, he struggled with swordsmanship and martial arts, which made the other nobles mock him, and Allen thinks that it might be the reason House Pendragon had weakened. Allen also discovered that he had traveled back in time. The original Allen was 17 years old when he first met him, and he learned that Allen fell into a coma at 14, remaining unconscious for 3 years. The new Allen has given up wondering why he woke up in the original Allen's body, because what matters now is that he has returned 7 years into the past, providing him with an opportunity for a fresh start. Freed from the Devil's army, he sees this as a chance to restore the Balt family's name and honor. He plans to accomplish his goals from his previous life and find out what Valtai meant by what he said about everything that happens to him being connected. He decides to fight again as Allen Pendragon and as Raven Balt. Irene interrupts his thoughts by asking him if he is listening, and he tells her to continue. She tells him that Lady Luna is on her way to see him, and when he asks who Luna is, she tells him that Luna is the adopted daughter of Count Sealord, a close ally of the Pendragon family, and she is his fiancée, which shocks him. On the road, the Sealord knights escort Lady Luna to the Conrad Castle. House Sealord's knight, Joseph Bryden, asks Lady Luna what it feels like to see her fiancé after 3 years. Luna asks him what he has to do with him, and instructs him to mind his own matters. Luna recalls Allen Pendragon as feeble and pathetic. She expects him to cower in a corner, unable to meet her eyes when they see each other. Her engagement with such a man was solely for her family's benefit, but today, her father has decided to call off the engagement. With House Pendragon in rapid decline, there are no longer advantages to being engaged to a noble house falling behind others. Luna never saw the weak Allen as her fiancé, and she is relieved to hear about her father's decision to break off the engagement. Joseph inquires about the breakup and tells him that it's none of his concern. She intends to make the announcement herself and warns him not to cause trouble with the Knights of Pendragon. Joseph bursts into laughter, asking if there are real knights in House Pendragon, and that even though Allen, whom he refers to as a brat, has regained consciousness, he won't be able to restore his family's former glory, especially since he failed to make a pact with the White Dragon. Joseph boasts about bringing more glory to House Sealord than House Pendragon could ever achieve. Luna, fed up with his offensive behavior, demands he step back. After Joseph apologizes, Luna reflects on the lack of decent men in both House Pendragon and House Sealord and says she hates the men in both families. Later, the Pendragons, including Allen, welcome Luna in the entrance hall of Conrad Castle. Luna greets them politely, Irene embraces her warmly, and Elena reciprocates Luna's greeting, and instructs Allen to show Luna to her room. Luna thinks that Allen is pathetic and that at his age, he is unable to greet guests without his mother's assistance. However, Allen confidently addresses Luna, mentioning it's been a long time, and invites her to follow him to her room, leaving her shocked. Leading the way, Allen inquires about Luna's knights. When she doesn't respond, he calls her name, snapping her out of shock, and then she rudely tells him to do as he wishes. Allen thinks that if this is the way Luna treats her fiancé she hasn't seen in 3 years, then the engagement is one of convenience. In the room, Lindsay asks Allen if tea should be served. Allen agrees and turns to Luna, telling her to make herself comfortable. Luna, surprised by the change in Allen's demeanor, wonders what's happening. The Allen she remembers couldn't even talk to her or look her in the eyes, but now he confidently interacts with her and the servants. She tells him that he has changed a lot, and asks him if he has forgotten her. He sits and crosses his legs as he apologizes for forgetting her, and she wonders if his loss of memory has turned him into a different person. She thinks that he is nothing like he used to be. Instead, he is a charming man capable of restoring glory to the Pendragon house. On the other hand, Allen thinks that she might be hiding something. He starts to say that if she doesn't like the way he can tell her father, she interrupts by shouting, "No," and then quickly apologizes as she composes herself. She wonders what is wrong with her, and thinks that her father has already decided to break off the engagement, and no matter how much he has changed, it is too late for House Pendragon to regain its power, so she must tell him. As she is about to tell him, bursts into the room, and tells Allen to go to the main hall with Luna because one of Luna's knights has caused a commotion. Allen glares at Luna, who knows that the troublemaker is Joseph. Allen leans forward as he tells Luna that she seems to be hiding something ever since she arrived and asks her if she came with a scheme. Luna denies it and thinks that she has to tell him. After all, she used to hate him. Before she can get the words out, he tells her that he will listen to her later, and they should stop her knight while walking away. She follows him wondering how a person can change so much. In the main hall, Joseph tells Elena and Melbourne that Count Sealord has cancelled the engagement, shocking Melbourne and irking Elena. Elena asks Joseph whether House Sealord is prepared to take responsibility for the consequences of breaking off the engagement, and Joseph says yes. To compensate them, Count Sealord promises to transfer ownership of the gold mine, crystal mine near the borders, and 2 sawmills in the Brynard Forest to House Pendragon, which surprises both Elena and Melbourne. Joseph suggests that House Pendragon should accept this generous proposal due to their apparent difficulty in hiring servants and knights, which earns him a stern glare from Elena and Melbourne. Elena knows about their financial struggles, but she feels like agreeing to call off the engagement will hurt the family's pride. As Elena begins to reject the offer, Joseph interjects, asking her if she is sure, and says that it may be the last opportunity to rebuild the Pendragon house. Allen makes a commanding entrance into the hall, ordering everyone to halt with an authoritative voice that catches everyone off guard. The Pendragon knights promptly kneel, eliciting prideful smiles from his mother and Melbourne. Joseph, however, sees this as an opportunity to demonstrate his superiority over the supposedly pathetic Allen. Allen coolly sits next to his mother, and interrupts Joseph's attempt to speak by questioning his identity, leaving Joseph bewildered. Allen reveals he has memory loss, so he has no idea who Joseph is. Joseph notices the change in Allen's personality and thinks that he may have changed, but he is still a worthless person, and he will make sure to put him in his place. Joseph attempts to reintroduce himself but is swiftly dismissed by Allen, who expresses disinterest in conversing with a mere knight. A shocked Joseph asks Allen how he could disrespect a knight of House Sealord, and Allen tells him that he is the only one being rude. Then he dismisses Joseph again and tells him not to make him repeat himself again, which renders Joseph speechless. Then Allen says that it looks like the ruckus he caused due to the news of breaking off his engagement with Luna, and then he orders Luna to come forward while beckoning her with his finger. Luna moves forward wondering what she should do, as she never expected the new side of Allen. Allen accepts the gifts offered by Count Sealord, saying it is even, which shocks Luna, Elena, and Melbourne, who try to convince Allen to rethink his decision because calling off the engagement could affect House Pendragon's reputation. Allen says that there are more important things they need to do in order for the House Pendragon to regain power, and that they have no time to fight over petty issues like marriage. Then he asks Luna what she thinks. She stammers as she thinks that she was going to say that she can't marry someone like him, but now she thinks that she has fallen in love with him. Allen, who is tired of waiting for her to reply, says that she shouldn't bother answering his question because she probably has no say in the matter since it is her family's decision. Then he says he accepts Lord Sealord's proposal to cancel the engagement. Then Allen asks Elena if she is alright, and she says that she trusts him as the head of House Pendragon. Then he officially declares as the head of House Pendragon that the engagement between him and Luna be called off. After that, he heads back to his room, accompanied by Lindsay, thinking about the Pendragon's financial status and how the gifts he got from Count Sealord will help improve their financial status. Deep in thought, he walks past the portrait of the old woman he saw when he first woke up. He stops and looks at the picture as he recalls her petting the dragon, and then he asks Lindsay who she is. Lindsay reveals that the woman is Lady Arthea, Duke Klein Pendragon's elder sister, Allen's grandfather from 2 generations ago. As Allen repeats her name, he hears a voice behind him, and to his surprise, Lady Arthea herself stands there. She expresses a desire to ask him something. Allen enters his room and locks the door while asking Arthea why she suddenly wishes to speak to him. She tells him that since she is already dead, she can't talk to him unless he says her name. He sits opposite her as he thinks that he has fought demonic monsters for 10 years but has never spoken to a ghost before. Then Arthea asks him who he is, and says that he is not her great-nephew Allen Pendragon, which shocks Allen. She apologizes for saying that in a threatening way, and tells Allen that Soldrake told her he is not the real Allen Pendragon. When Allen inquires if she knows who he is, she says no and asks him why he is in her great-nephew's body. He thinks that gaining her support would be beneficial since he's the only one who sees her, so he recounts his journey into Allen Pendragon's body. When he finishes, he asks her if she believes him. Arthea says that it isn't important, and says that the Allen Pendragon he guarded at the Roptine Plains was likely a fake. Then she asks him if he is aware that the successor of House Pendragon can open the Pendragon Mausoleum after a pact with Soldrake. According to Arthea, the significance of the Pendragon Mausoleum extends beyond a shrine of the souls of their ancestors. If Allen can open it, he will be able to possess the family fortune and power, as well as Soldrake's familiars. There is a magic tower within the mausoleum where Allen can view arcane magic, which is the source of Pendragon's greatness. When the mausoleum opens, the family power will be strong, and when it closes, the power declines. However, the successor gets only one chance to open the mausoleum, and if he fails, the opportunity will be passed down to the next generation. Arthea says that formidable figures like Klein and Gordon Pendragon faced challenges in making a pact, and Allen Pendragon, who was the weakest Pendragon in history, failed to make a pact with Soldrake, which was what led to his coma. She adds that it is highly unlikely for a successor who failed to make a pact to revive, and on top of that, the proud white dragon only obeys those who are strong enough to overcome her power. So the chances of Allen Pendragon going to war with Soldrake and meeting Raven are 0. Arthea leans close to Allen as she says that what matters is that Allen Pendragon, possessed by another soul, has awakened, which means the new Allen has the chance of making a pact with Soldrake. Referring to him as Raven Balt, she urges him to venture into the perilous Acorna forest, which is a den of ferocious demonic beasts, eliminate the swarming monsters, reach the mausoleum, which is in the deepest part of the forest, and show his powers to Soldrake, who watches over the mausoleum, and make a pact with her. She adds that she wants him to open the mausoleum as the true successor of House Pendragon, and then asks him if he is willing to do so. Without thinking twice, Allen eagerly agrees to open the mausoleum because of the benefits the mausoleum holds. He tells her that if House Pendragon were to regain its power it would help him, and he is willing to use everything he can to accomplish his goals. Arthea thinks that she likes the way he is willing to do anything to achieve his goals. She tells him that she may do as he wishes as long as he restores the glory to Pendragon. He thanks her and says that he would first need to gain control over the vassals and that due to the original Allen's past, the vassals probably think that he is a weak good-for-nothing, which is why he can't lead them into battle with him. Arthea, who understands, says that she hopes he does a good job of distinguishing the foolish from the wise, but it will not be easy. Allen says that he will need a fortnight to gain control of the vassals and make preparations to head to the mausoleum, and he will resolve everything by force within that time. In the subsequent days, Allen engages in relentless training. As he trains, he imagines that he is fighting demonic monsters like he used to and tells himself not to depend solely on his allies, and to go into battle with the resolve of finishing everything with his own hands. After his training for the day, Lindsay offers him a fresh shirt, and he nonchalantly changes in her presence, which makes her blush. He thinks that when he first woke up as Allen, he was so weak that he couldn't even swing a sword, but after a few days of training. But now he has returned to the formidable state from his Devil's Army days, complete with his healing powers and combat prowess. Knight Mark Killian from House Pendragon arrives, surprised by Allen's swordsmanship practice, and says that Allen should have been informed as he is Allen's teacher. Allen pats Mark on the shoulder and says that he has arranged a big stage for him. In the main hall, Allen gathers all the Pendragon knights, including Mark and Melbourne, and announces his plan to open the mausoleum soon, leaving them astonished. Mark expresses concerns about various obstacles, highlighting insufficient manpower and Allen's unreadiness for battle. Dismissing worries about his condition, Allen urges Mark to update him on the situation outside Balt Fortress. Mark reveals the region is overrun by bandits and demonic monsters, and emphasizes on the dangers beyond the fortress. Despite the peril, Allen insists on holding their ground in the region. Melbourne suggests that Allen addresses House Pendragon's financial issues first, by using the mines provided by Sealord, and he proposes that Allen trains with Mark before facing battle. Allen questions the source of military power to safeguard the mines and says that opening the mausoleum is their sole solution. Determined, he sets a 2-week timeline for the expedition, to which Mark objects. Then Allen challenges Mark to a duel and asks him if the idea of him leading his own men is amusing. Mark tells Allen that he won't survive in a battle with him after he has lived a life of reading and painting. Annoyed by Mark's words, Allen draws his sword and attacks, catching Mark off guard with a powerful blow, which surprises Mark, who manages to block the attack. They engage in a swift exchange of swordplay, with Allen leaping to avoid Mark's swings and landing slashes. Mark brags that Allen can't beat him because he didn't undergo proper training, and he just woke up after spending 3 years in bed. Allen sheaths his sword and then uses it to whack Mark in the chest, which makes Mark collapse, surprising Melbourne and the other knights. Then he announces that they will go to battle in 2 weeks, and says that is going to make a pact with the White Dragon and open the mausoleum. He asks if there are any more objections, and the knights say no and that they will follow him no matter what. Joseph bursts into Luna's room, asking her why she lingers at the Pendragon Duchy and why she's intent on joining Allen in battle. He suggests she return home with him, who is an experienced knight. Luna calls him a vain and arrogant man who enjoys demeaning others and asks him if he ever questioned why she remains at the Duchy of Pendragon. Then she tells him that even though the engagement has been called off, there is still a need to keep an eye on the Pendragons to figure out how their actions will influence House Sealord in the future. Joseph proposes they only accompany Allen to Balt Fortress, and Luna agrees to return with him from there. Luna believes witnessing Allen open the mausoleum will restore House Pendragon's former glory, and she wants to assess his skills firsthand. Meanwhile, Joseph thinks that Allen did not only humiliate him but also seduced his lady Luna, and because of that, he will make sure to teach Allen a lesson when they go into battle. To see Allen and Soldrake's battle, please like, share, and comment to fight Manhwa. Thank you.